Production funding for Ruckus has been provided by Fred and Lou Hartwig and viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Ruckus, our weekly food for thought fight over the news of the day and the trends of the times. I'm Mike Shadden. The Ruckettes join me shortly. Our topics tonight: where there's a George Will, there may be a way for Greg Orman. Where did the Joe go, by the way? And the more things change in Kansas City politics, the more they stay the same. Plus, of course, roast and toast from the panelists. But first, our Ruckus Newsmaker interview with Professor Alan Katz, the former U.S. ambassador to Portugal and now a professor at the Block School of Management in Kansas City. Katz is also co-founder of Village Square, described as a nonpartisan public forum where people with diverse views can come together and discuss issues of critical local and national importance. Village Square was founded in Florida. It has now found its way to Kansas City, and one of its goals is to teach people to disagree agreeably. And what better place to start on that than here on Ruckus? Ambassador, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
People not being civil about discussions regarding politics is nothing new in this country. In fact, from time immemorial, back when the framers were talking about a constitution, there were some pretty heated exchanges. Hamilton and Jefferson weren't the closest of friends. Is there a special need now, a special problem today?
Yeah, I think we've evolved to a point now where basically we spend most of our time around people that agree with us, and therefore we think that our opinions are facts. And if we're a liberal and we want to be sure, we turn on MSNBC, and if we're a conservative and we want to be sure, we turn on Fox News. And the problem is that we spend virtually no time having a conversation with people who disagree with us. And the real problem is in addition to that, we've come to demonize those people who disagree with us because we don't spend any time around them.
And that happens on both sides, though, the far left, the far right.
There's no question about it. And we've always had people on the margins, on the fringes in our political society, but generally we've been able to marginalize them. But it seems like about 15, 20 years ago, and if you're a Republican, you probably talk about the Bork nomination. If you're a Democrat, you probably talk about the Republican takeover of Congress. And there's some truth probably in both, but the reality was that's when the people on the fringes stole the megaphone. And they have essentially said, if you don't agree with me, you're a bad person.
Well, you know, it's hard, I think, to find some place that will give you the essential facts of a news story fairly. There was a time you could go to the New York Times, perhaps, or Washington Post, but you don't find that kind of neutrality in front page presentations anymore.
Well, I think that we used to all have, we used to have a common well of facts that we all drew from, and then we argued about what they meant. And what we do at the Village Square, frankly, is we have these, and this is, in fact, the first one's going to be next week on the 9th of October here at the Public Library. It's a dinner, and what we have is this. We have people make presentations. We have fact checkers, so if someone says something that isn't true, they're called on it at the time. We keep people from being uncivil in the conversation that we're having.
How do you do that?
Well, two ways. Number one, we announce the rules in advance. In fact, we start with some of George Washington's rules of civility, which is sort of, again, going back to the founders, which we think is kind of like the basis for what we're trying to do here. And we have a civility bell, and one Democrat and one Republican.
I'm sorry, a civility bell?
And if you are, exactly, if you are starting
it's like name that tune.
Well, the only difference is we stop naming that tune because basically we're trying to have what we would call a good conversation. And I think that the idea of this is not to turn conservatives into liberals or liberals into conservatives. It's not even to reach a consensus on any particular issue. It's more, it recognizes that we believe that it's the human interaction, it's the human relationships that takes away the toxicity that has sort of seeped into all of our political dialogue.
Well, Professor, how do you decide the definition of civil for your purposes?
Well, basically what we mean is that you don't raise your voice, you don't call people names. You can disagree vociferously with someone. You think that they're wrong and you can point out why they're wrong, but that doesn't mean that you have to demean them.
You can't define it, but we know it when we hear it.
That's a very, to paraphrase the Supreme Court, that's
right. Before we get too far along here and run out of time, I know you do have this event coming up a week from today. That's next Thursday, down at the Public Library in Kansas City, Missouri. It's a dinner. Talk a little bit more about what will happen there and how people can attend if they choose.
We're going to have three panelists. We have David Obey, who has served in Congress for over 40 years and was chairman of the Appropriations Committee. We have Brian Deloge, who is the vice president of the National Association of Counties. And we have John Bluford, who recently retired here from the Truman Medical Center. And the topic is the price of incivility at the federal, the state, and the local level. It will be a dinner which will start at 6 o'clock at the library. We have free parking. There is a charge for the dinner. But if you want to come to the dinner and you can't afford it, we have some scholarships
I was
available.
going to ask you if it's too expensive for people like me.
No, I think you can. I think you can manage it. Students,
What is the
it's
fee?
$25 for the dinner, $45 for a couple, $15 for students. And if you want to find out about it, you go to kc.tothevillagesquare.org.
All right, when you have these presentations, there are people in the audience. Do you make any effort to ensure they're equally divided between political parties and political ideologies?
We have an advisory board, and our co-chairs are Mary Block, who is a Missouri Democrat, and Peggy Dunn, who is a Kansas Republican.
Couldn't you get anybody well known to do this?
And so what we're doing here is trying to make sure, frankly, that people, regardless of their political affiliation or background, are comfortable.
Is the audience allowed to cheer or jeer or do
No,
anything of that
actually,
sort?
we discourage that. We tell the audience that this kind of group clapping sort of turns into sort of a cheering contest, which sort of undermines what we're trying to do. The whole idea really is this. If you're sitting across the table from someone who disagrees with you politically, which most of the time, by the way, we never do, but here's an opportunity to do that, and what you find out is you may disagree with them on whatever the issue is, but you both have kids and you both have a house.
We
and
have
many things
more
in
that
common.
unites us than divides us.
Exactly.
Professor, thank you very much. And by the way, I assume you have a Democrat bouncer and a Republican bouncer for those
Absolutely.
people in the
Of
audience
course, but
who
of course.
refuse to be civil.
Of course.
All right, that is Professor Alan Katz of Village Square. Now let's have the Rockettes square off as we start a ruckus. Hey, we're getting the band back together tonight. The panel features Kansas City Star editorial writer Yael Abouhaka, Gwen Grant, president and CEO of the Urban League, media and communications consultant Mary O'Halloran, and Winnie Kozad, president of the Kozad Company, a government relations firm. Lengthy story in the Sunday Kansas City Star seemed designed to make this one-sentence point. The success story of Johnson County has been written not with an escape from taxes, some argue, but in large part because of them. The story notes that Johnson Countyans don't mind taxes, even higher ones, because they make available many amenities and top-notch provision of basic services. Now, the day before the Star ran this story, Johnson County is eliminating its transportation department, turning it over to the Area Transportation Authority, the ATA, because the move is expected to save up to $500,000 in taxes each year. Johnson County broke from the ATA in 1981 for the same reason, to save money. Hey, wait a minute, we're talking about Johnson County. Mary, why not just raise taxes, keep the cleverly titled The Joe under Joe Co-management?
Well, I'll take that back to Johnson County this afternoon and tell them you said that, Mike. Actually, this is a great story. I mean, the change in attitude at what is our regional transit authority and the change in leadership, which has been there for some time, but the story of Robbie Makinen and his reaching out to people like Steve Klicka and others on the Johnson County Commission and saying, look, we have to put together an authentically regional infrastructure to lay the groundwork for a 21st century transit system. And he surprisingly got a lot of support. They get to save money. The ATA will manage the system, which gives them economies of scale when they buy fuel and supplies of all sorts and buses themselves. And Johnson County, as I said, saves money, and they've been doing good things for them. So this is a move forward, and I give Robbie Makinen a lot of credit for that. He's a great personal story. He had.
But we don't have time for it.
He became blind, and that's the
has
reason
the
that he
Joe ever
did this.
enjoyed significant ridership?
Not significant ridership, but I mean, there's one major thing going on here, which is there's just been a barrier between Johnson County and Kansas City, Missouri for so many years. And I've written about it for a long time because, you know, as a region, we need to move forward. And you have the state line, and you have this, you know, Johnson County haughty approach of, well, you know, they can't spend dollars correctly in Kansas City, Missouri. And there's some distrust over, you know, the Johnson County mantra as well, that, you know, everything's perfect over here. But if we can get people like Klicka and other people to agree that, hey, there are some economies of scale, there are ways to work together on not just on buses, but on arts and on sports and on all other kinds of things, that would be really good for this community. And this is maybe a first step. You know, transportation is very important. It's a first step, but it's a very good step.
Gwen, is it true what the premise of the story is, that the success of Johnson County is written not with an escape from taxes, but large part responsible for what goes on in Johnson County, its success, the fact that
Yeah.
there are significant taxes.
I think that is true. I think that Johnson County residents are willing to pay taxes to so that they can have the amenities. They want their schools, quality schools, and sidewalk curbs and potholes and everything. And so they go for increased
Isn't that
taxes.
what
And
cities are supposed to
that's what they're
provide, what
supposed to
taxes
provide.
are
But
supposed to
the
do?
key point here is when you talk about tax cuts, then and you're wanting to always make tax cuts, what you don't realize is that you're taking away basic services and amenities that contribute to the quality of life in communities. So the lower the tax base, the higher the likelihood that basic services will suffer and
Well, hang
quality
on.
of life will
Woody, there's
lower.
a sentence in the story. Let me read it to you and get you to react to it. It says, Johnson County is in a twilight zone, somewhere between a willingness to invest more money and an emphasis on budget cutting. And that's probably true in large portions of the United States, that kind of struggle.
The world lives in that twilight zone. That's not twilight zone, that's reality. I mean, look, this false dichotomy, you got low taxes, lousy services, you got high taxes, great services. Well, really, Kansas City has high taxes. You go take the citizen satisfaction survey, they don't think the services are so great. It
Woody,
matters.
Johnson County has low taxes.
And what?
Johnson County has low taxes.
That's right.
But they're
And
on the
excellent
rise.
services. And I live in Platte County, and we've got parks all over the place, and biking paths and recreation areas, and low taxes. And if you want a tax increase in Platte County, because you're in Missouri, you got to go to the voters about it, and they don't always vote for them, but they do sometimes.
But what works in Johnson County may not work in every county in Kansas or every county in America. And I thought the story was largely designed to discredit Sam Brownback's tax policies.
Did eventually, Mike, but one of the things I disagreed with Brad Cooper, he's ordinarily a pretty good writer, but he had this theory, that
You'll be glad to know that.
that Johnson County, it's taxes that made the county what it is. Wrong. It was the founders and the continuing support of the people of the county who decided what they wanted, how they wanted to live, and then they decided that they were willing to pay for it.
Let me tell you something. It's good, efficient government using the taxes
But the people
give.
decided. It wasn't like we had
Well,
government
and the
created.
two people running for commission chairman, neither one of those two is very high on increasing taxes, it would seem to me.
Well, no.
Well, and the good thing is, as Mary said, the people will decide if they're going to have higher taxes for better libraries, higher taxes for better parks, both of which I think they should at least attempt to do. They'll have that decision to make. But Woody's right, it's good government, but you have to have the money to provide the services.
All right, a nationally known, prominent conservative commentator, George Will, whose trenchant columns are sadly and inexplicably no longer available in the Kansas City Star, says the Kansas Senate race is now Greg Orman's to lose. Will came to this area, met with Orman, and left with what seems to be a positive reaction. In his column, Will writes, electing Orman would deepen the Senate's pool of talent, but it might thwart Republican efforts to control the Senate. Will is troubled by Orman's failure to indicate with which party he would caucus, but impressed with his fluency on public policy issues. One newspaper's headline for the column claims it's a virtual endorsement from Will. Another says the columnist appears conflicted. So what does George Will want Kansas Republicans to do? Vote for Roberts or vote for Orman? What do you think, Woody?
Well, he lives in Washington, so I presume he's noticed because he mentioned it in the column. Eventually, it's a pretty opaque column. The confusion of the people trying to interpret it is certainly understandable. A lot of Will's columns have been.
Maybe this is why he's not in the Star anymore, but please proceed, Woody.
Too opaque.
I thought you guys specialize in opaque prose. So anyway, look, the most important thing about the Senate is it's turned into the House. It's run by one guy. There's only one vote that matters. If Orman has the most wonderful idea in the world, if Harry Reid's the majority leader and he doesn't have the votes for that idea or doesn't like the idea, it will never be heard from. It's dead. Politics, the Democrats have gone to a lot of trouble for this guy. They've squeezed out their own candidate for Orman. They've squeezed out the Democratic candidate. They're raising Democratic money for him. George Soros having a fundraiser for him. They've gone to a lot of trouble for him. Now, this is politics. Somebody's told them they're going to get something for their money. And listen now to Orman. What's he say? He says, oh, if the Republicans have a clear majority, I'm with them. If the Democrats have a clear majority. Well, what if there isn't a clear majority? Mumble.
Yeah,
We'll talk
he
about
says
that later.
he will caucus with whatever party is clearly in the majority. If it's the GOP, it'll be the GOP for him. What do Kansas Democrats think about possibly electing a guy who will caucus with the Republicans?
I had a couple beers with some Kansas Democrats last night, and they think he's interesting. Most of them haven't met him. They do not see him as the Democratic candidate necessarily. But here's what some of them were excited about. This race with Orman indicates that that you guys talk about Kansas being the red state and nothing can happen, nothing's going on. The people have, decided way ahead of the elections how things are going to be. Well, this guy, Greg Orman, has shaken up the political life of the state. He has beaten Chris Kobach in the courts. And the courts side of them says, of course you can run. You can run, and the Democrats don't have to do anything they don't want to do. We're a party. We don't have to support.
Well, he's certainly gotten the state national attention, and tremendous
he's an
attention
man.
is focused on this because
in Wichita. He is a fine speaker, and he knows exactly what he thinks and believes.
Here's
and that's
something I don't
refreshing.
quite understand, Yale. I've read a couple of stories that say the Tea Party in Kansas is threatening to sit it out during this campaign, therefore not vote for Roberts. How do Tea Party conservatives benefit by Greg Orman being elected?
I don't think they would benefit at all. So, I mean, eventually they would vote for Roberts. They'd have to. To answer your question, I thought the column came down on the side of electing Pat Roberts.
Yeah.
Without saying one good thing about Pat Roberts. It's amazing. But at the very end, he goes, what's the most important thing here? To improve 1% of the Senate, or to basically get rid of Harry Reid from the Republican perspective. So he wants to get rid of Harry Reid, and I think basically keeping Pat Roberts helps do that. It helps ensure that.
Yeah,
but the other thing is, Greg Orman did come in, did talk to the editorial board this week, and I was not prepared to be, because he did not do well in the debate, in my opinion. A couple weeks ago at the state fair, kind of, not answering the questions and that kind of thing. He answered every single one of our questions. The caucus thing, he's still, I'm sorry, with the exception of the caucus one. But at the end of the day, you realize, no, he will caucus with the Democrats if it's close. I think I'm with you on that. But I do think Kansas would benefit from having a smart guy in the Senate. And even if he caucuses with the Republicans.
Mike, imagine how much trading he's going to be able to do before he decides if he's elected.
He's already had a private auction, boys. It's not going to be an auction or a trade. He's made the sale.
He's an independent person.
If Reid needs his vote to be majority leader, he's got it.
We've got to wrap it up. Star editorial said he was a pragmatist. Is that a fair description of him?
I think so. Yeah,
sure.
Meaning he'll do what works.
Yes.
Or what Harry Reid tells him to do.
What Harry Reid tells him to do.
It already is working.
The old saying that the more things change, the more they stay the same appears applicable in Kansas City, Missouri politics. Some familiar names are surfacing as city elections loom 7 months away. Ken Bacchus, Louis Wright, Jolie Justice, John Fierro, just to name a few. And there is speculation that some potential candidates are going to run in opposition to Mayor Sly James on issues like a new airport and streetcar expansion. The only potential candidate to oppose James for mayor at this point is Dan Coffern, who appeared recently on Ruckus.
I would focus 110% on quality basic services throughout the city. More specifically, my top priority would be dealing with the causes of crime and poor school performance.
And I believe he said he would announce his plans either in October or November. Right. You follow all this very closely. What do you make of recent developments in this list of potential candidates?
Well, in doing the in-depth presentation, preparation for the show, I went back and looked at the 7 elections. This will be the 7th election I've covered since 1991 of local, the 91, 95, and every time around. There's usually a mayor who looks like they're unbeatable. Barnes was going to be unbeatable in her second term, and she barely made it out the primary, more or less. Cleaver, when he ran for re-election, he had a tough race against Dan Coffern. I do not think that Sly James is going to have a tough election, but that's still 6 or 8 months away. I think he's done a really good job, and as opposed to what Dan Coffin thinks, I think he's actually done a pretty good job in basic services. So you then go to, well, what's the overall quality of the council going to be? The names you mentioned, there's some high-quality people on there. There's some people who are stepping down who have provided good service, like Jan Markison, people like that, Cindy Serco, I think have done a decent job. But there's a good pipeline. I like term limits to the degree that we're getting rid of some people that, okay, now we're going to get some people with different strengths in there. But you also see, like Bacchus, like Ed Ford is on the thing now, like John Sharp, like Jim Glover, they've all went off and came back on. So, and that is some experience, and that's good. But I think the next round of elections, which will be in, April and June, a different election cycle, will be good for Kansas City. I think there are going to be some very good candidates running.
Yeah, Gwen?
Yeah, I agree. We've got lots of new faces and some old faces coming. But I kind of like the fact that some experienced people are coming back, because when you have a lot of, I'm not a big fan of term limits. Sometimes you wish you have, but I like to have some experience around the table. And I think, though, I agree that as far as the mayor goes, I don't see there a formidable candidate surfacing just yet, but I agree, down the road, maybe someone will. The interesting thing is those folks who feel like, well, we can't defeat the mayor, but maybe if we can get in a 7-vote majority, we can, get a little control. But that's somewhat unrealistic even at this point to even speculate on that, because the mayor appoints the mayor pro tem, and he appoints the committee chairs. So they're going to be loyal to the mayor. I mean, or lose their committee assignment.
No, people who feel that way are going to have to make their cases on issues rather than on Sly James. He's very popular personally, and that has always counted for a great deal in Kansas City.
Woody, do you think it's likely, what we're talking about here, that there would be a slate of candidates of people who are opposed to a couple of key issues that James is promoting, for example, a new airport and/or expansion of the streetcar system?
Well, there might, I don't know what you call a slate. There might be two or three
several
people.
candidates who
there might be
work
two or three
together.
people running that way, but in the end, they wind up running freelance. It is one of my problems with Kansas City governance that we do not have something equivalent to sort of like political parties. When I was a young man, decades and decades ago, the Citizens Association didn't just endorse candidates, it ran a slate of candidates. And you knew what they were for and what they were against. And when you voted for the Citizens Association, they had an agenda. And when you elected enough of them, that agenda was going to take place. Now everybody runs on his or her own.
But there are still endorsements, aren't there? They just aren't.
Yeah, but that's all they are.
But I think here's the key, and here's the difference from even, again, short 25 years ago when I started covering this stuff, is that the problems these days are so complex that if, okay, I'm Ed Ford and I'm going to be with Jermaine Reed on this, well, the next problem comes, well, I don't agree with him on that. And I think they really have become more diverse as far as the problems go, and the money is not there to do all the great things we want to do. Therefore, you can't just have people lockstep. I'm going to go with whatever Jan Markison says, I'm with her. No, that doesn't happen as much anymore as I think it used to.
All right, it is time now for Roast and Toast, where we give a pat on the back or a kick in the pants to people and events in the news. So let's start this week with Mary.
Well, it's easy choice for me this week. The toast of the week goes to the new candidate, now free and clear to be the opposition to Pat Roberts, Greg Orman. And Greg Orman has the very best political ad that I've seen so far in this campaign. It is clear, he looks right into the camera and he says the following: Pat Roberts is attacking me, and that's exactly what's wrong with Washington today. They'd rather attack their opponents than take on the problems that we face. And it doesn't get any better than that, and other candidates should take note of how clear and easy that is to understand from an independent candidate. Good ad.
I'm toasting Julia Pearson for quickly stepping down as director of the Secret Service in the aftermath of one after another failure to protect the White House appropriately, to protect the president, so many breaches in security, and then the horrible manner in which she conducted herself in the hearings on Capitol Hill. I mean, it was just embarrassing. And I was disappointed that to have a woman in leadership show up in the way that she did, and I'm glad she stepped aside so we can get on with getting the Secret Service back on track.
A toast to sports along Interstate 70. First, my Tigers go to South Carolina. In the last 7 minutes, they find a way to win. K-State whoops its opponent right into the ground. The Chiefs trash the Patriots. And the Royals play what may be the best baseball game I've ever seen in my life. And then the cherry on top of the whole Sunday is that the football program at KU is completely in the sewer, and they're looking for another coach. Who says you can't have it all? Actually, you Jayhawks, basketball's just around the corner.
Well, I guess this will have to be a toast to the Royals. I wrote my column this morning about how our sports-obsessed nation is just a little bit off kilter here with racist chants at Chiefs games and the expense of everything. But at the end of the day, it is something that we, it helps bring a community together. I think we spent too much money on the Truman Sports Complex, but it is good that we'll all be watching this weekend how the Royals do.
Go Royals.
And finally, here's a quick roast to Kelly Kultala, a Wyandotte County Democrat trying to unseat Kevin Yoder in the Kansas 3rd District congressional race. Her TV commercial makes reference to the incident when Yoder stood nude in the Sea of Galilee with some colleagues. Yes, Yoder did a stupid thing, but it's hardly a campaign issue. In reality, the incident is water under the bridge, and the Kultala campaign is likely dead in the water. To submit your roast or toast about people and events in the news, use one of the methods shown at the bottom of the screen, or simply go to ruckus@kcpt.org. And that is Ruckus for this week. Thanks for joining us. Back next Thursday at 7 o'clock. Good night.